The gavel fell with the sound of breaking bones. Sold to the gentleman in the back for 15 cents. Clara's hands trembled against the rough rope binding her wrists, but her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon beyond the auction block. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not after they'd stripped away everything. Her family's farm, her father's good name, even the small silver locket her mother had pressed into her palm before the fever took her. The crowd of bidders dispersed like buzzards abandoning a picked clean carcass, their laughter echoing off the weathered buildings of Millfield's main street. 15 cents. That's what 22 years of life was worth to these people. Less than the cost of a decent meal. Come on then, girl. The auctioneer's assistant yanked her forward, his grip leaving fresh bruises on her already raw wrists. Your new owner's waiting. Clara stumbled down the wooden steps, dirt staining her torn dress, the same blue cotton she'd worn to church just 3 months ago, back when she'd had a church to attend and a reputation worth protecting. Now the fabric hung in tatters, evidence of the long journey from her family's foreclosed farm to this god-forsaken trading post. She expected to see another leering face, another man who'd bought her for reasons that made her stomach churn. Instead, she found herself looking up at someone unexpected, tall, weathered, with silver threading through dark hair beneath a worn hat. His eyes weren't filled with the cruel hunger she'd learned to recognize. They held something else entirely, something that looked almost like regret. "Ma'am," he said quietly, tipping his hat. No mockery in his voice, no ownership. The assistant shoved the rope into the stranger's calloused hands. "She's all yours, mister. Enjoy your bargain." The rancher, for that's what he appeared to be, judging by his clothes and the strong smell of cattle and leather, didn't respond to the crude comment. Instead, he studied Clara's face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "What's your name?" he asked. She hadn't expected the question. Most buyers hadn't bothered to ask. "Clara, I'm Jonas." He paused as if weighing his next words carefully. "You hungry, Clara?" The simple question nearly undid her. When was the last time someone had cared about her comfort, her basic needs? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Jonas gestured toward a modest wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "There's a long ride ahead. We should get started." As they walked away from the auction block, Clara caught fragments of whispered conversations from the remaining crowd. Words like fool and waste of money followed them down the dusty street. But there was something else in those voices, disappointment, as if her new owner had somehow cheated them out of expected entertainment. The wagon rolled steadily westward as afternoon shadows lengthened across the prairie. Jonas had given Clara a clean blanket and a portion of bread and dried meat, more food than she'd seen in weeks. But questions burned in her throat like swallowed smoke. "Why?" she finally asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them for miles. Jonas didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the trail ahead, hands steady on the reins. "Why what? Why bid at all? Everyone else was laughing, walking away. You could have let me." She couldn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would have happened to an unsold woman at that kind of auction. "Didn't seem right," he said simply. The answer frustrated her. There had to be more to it. Men didn't spend money, even 15 cents, without expecting something in return. "What do you want from me?" This time Jonas did look at her, and Clara saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "I want you to have a choice," he said. "When we reach my ranch, you can stay and work for fair wages, or I'll help you get wherever you're trying to go. Your decision." Clara stared at him. "You're lying." "No, ma'am, I'm not. Nobody does that. Nobody buys a person just to set them free." Jonas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of old wounds. "My sister was sold at an auction like that one, 15 years ago, after our parents died and the bank took everything." He shifted the reins to one hand, his knuckles white with tension. "I was too young, too poor to bid. Had to watch strangers, had to watch what happened to her." The words hung between them like a bridge. Clara wasn't sure she was ready to cross. She'd learned not to trust kindness. It usually came with hidden costs. But something in Jonas's voice, in the careful way he kept his distance while still offering protection, made her want to believe him.
Oh.
What happened to her? Clara asked softly. Don't know. Lost track after the man who bought her moved on. Jonas's jaw tightened. Been looking ever since. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon behind them, small but growing larger. Jonas noticed it at the same moment Clara did. His entire body went rigid. How many people knew you were planning to bid today? Clara asked, a chill running down her spine despite the warm afternoon. Nobody. Jonas reached under the wagon seat and pulled out a rifle. But word travels fast in small towns, especially when someone does something folks consider unusual. The dust cloud was definitely moving their way, and it was moving fast. The thunder of hoofbeats reached them before the riders came into view. 5 men, maybe 6, pushing their horses hard across the open ground. Jonas urged his team faster, but a loaded wagon was no match for men on horseback with something to prove. Get down in the bed, Jonas ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. Cover yourself with that blanket. What's happening? Nothing good. He checked his rifle, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a pistol, which he pressed into Clara's hands. You know how to use this? She nodded. Her father had taught her to shoot, back when they'd had livestock to protect from predators. Though she'd never imagined the predators would turn out to be men. The riders caught up just as Jonas was pulling the wagon toward a cluster of rocks that would provide some cover. Clara recognized some of the faces, men who'd been at the auction, men who'd laughed when her price dropped lower and lower. Their leader was Tom Brennan, a local rancher with a reputation for taking what he wanted and dealing with consequences later. Afternoon, Jonas, Brennan called out, reining his horse to a stop 20 feet away. His men spread out in a loose semicircle, hands resting casually on their weapons. Heard you made an interesting purchase today. Legal purchase, Jonas replied evenly. Got the papers to prove it. Brennan's smile was cold as Winter Creek water. Now that's where things get complicated. See, some of the boys think you might have misunderstood the nature of that particular auction. How's that? Well, word is you paid good money for something you planned to just give away. Makes the rest of us look bad, like we don't know the value of what we're buying. Clara's blood ran cold. This wasn't about money or property rights. This was about pride, about maintaining a system where women like her had no agency, no hope of escape. Jonas kept his rifle ready, but not quite aimed. What I do with my property is my business. See, that's where you're wrong. Brennan dismounted slowly, deliberately. What you do affects all of us. Sets a bad precedent. Other women might start getting ideas above their station, and we can't have that, one of the other men added with a harsh laugh. Jonas's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Ride away, Tom, this doesn't concern you. Oh, but it does. Brennan took a step closer. You see, I had my eye on that particular item. Figured I'd pick her up cheap after everyone else lost interest. But then you had to go and play the hero. Clara felt the weight of the pistol in her hands. 6 shots, 6 men. The math wasn't in their favor, even if Jonas was as good with that rifle as he appeared to be. Last chance, Brennan said, his hand moving to his gun. Hand her over, and we'll call it even. Keep her and, he shrugged. Well, dead men don't need ranch hands anyway. Time stretched like pulled taffy. Clara could hear her own heartbeat, could smell the sweat and leather and gun oil that seemed to permeate the air around dangerous men. But instead of the fear she expected, she felt something else rising in her chest, rage. I have something to say. The words came out stronger than she'd intended. Clara stood up in the wagon bed, letting the blanket fall away, 6 pairs of eyes fixed on her, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel like prey. You want to know what I'm worth? She held up the pistol, not quite pointing it at anyone but making sure they all saw it. More than 15 cents, more than whatever you planned to pay. Brennan laughed, but it sounded forced. Little wildcat's got some fight in her. I like that. You're not listening. Clara's voice cut through his amusement. I said I have something to say. She reached into her torn dress and pulled out the small silver locket, the only thing of value she had left in the world. It caught the afternoon sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the rocks. My mother gave me this before she died, told me it would protect me. She looked directly at Jonas. I thought she was being sentimental, but I think I understand now. Jonas met her eyes, and she saw something pass between them. Not ownership, not transaction, but recognition. One human being acknowledging another's right to exist, to choose, to matter. This man, Clara continued, gesturing toward Jonas, paid 15 cents for me, but he was the only one who asked my name, the only one who offered me food, the only one who gave me a choice. She fastened the locket around her neck, the familiar weight of it settling against her collarbone like armor. So here's my choice. Clara raised the pistol, this time with clear intent. Anyone who wants to take me from him is going to have to explain to my mother why her locket is covered in their blood. The silence that followed was different from before, heavier. Brennan and his men exchanged glances, clearly not having expected resistance from what they'd assumed was a broken woman. You'd kill for him? Brennan asked. A stranger who bought you like cattle? No, Clara said quietly. I'd kill for me, for the right to decide my own fate. Jonas shifted beside her, rifle still ready but his posture slightly relaxed. She's made her choice, Tom, just like I made mine. And what choice was that? To believe that some things are worth more than money. The standoff might have lasted forever, but the sound of approaching riders from the east changed everything. Brennan cursed under his breath as a group of men in badges came into view, the territorial marshal and his deputies, drawn by reports of trouble. Gentlemen, the marshal called out as he approached. Heard there might be some disagreement out here. Brennan's hand moved away from his gun. Just a business discussion, Marshal, nothing that concerns the law. Oh, but it does. The marshal's eyes were hard as flint. See, I got word that some folks might be planning to interfere with a legal transaction. That's theft, by my understanding. Clara watched the dynamics shift. Brennan and his men were dangerous, but they weren't stupid. A fight with Jonas and her was one thing. A fight with territorial law enforcement was another matter entirely. No interference here, Brennan said tightly, just expressing concern for unusual business practices. The marshal looked at Jonas. This woman purchased legally. Yes, sir, got the papers right here, and she's free to leave if she chooses. Jonas glanced at Clara. Yes, sir, her choice entirely. The marshal nodded. Then I'd say this discussion is over. His hand rested on his weapon as he looked at Brennan. Unless someone wants to argue with territorial law. The confrontation deflated like a punctured balloon. Brennan and his men mounted their horses, muttering among themselves but making no further moves toward violence. As they rode away, Brennan called back over his shoulder. This isn't finished, Jonas. Yes, it is, Clara said loudly enough for him to hear. It's finished. The marshal and his men stayed long enough to make sure the troublemakers were truly gone, then continued on their own patrol. As dust settled back over the prairie, Jonas and Clara found themselves alone again. You could still leave, Jonas said quietly. Marshall made that clear enough. Clara looked at the locket in her palm, then at the man who'd given her the chance to choose her own path. I could, but I think I'd like to see this ranch you mentioned, see what fair wages look like. Jonas smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It's not much, small operation, but the work's honest, and the food's decent. Sounds like paradise compared to where I've been. As they resumed their journey westward, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not the desperate, grasping kind that led to disappointment, but the steady, sustainable kind that came from knowing she had allies in the world. Years later, when Clara ran her own small farm with Jonas as her partner, in business and in life, she would remember that afternoon on the prairie. How the weight of her mother's locket had felt like armor, how the choice to fight for her own dignity had changed everything. She would tell the story to other women who found themselves with nowhere to turn, reminding them that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. But mostly she would remember the moment she realized that her worth could never be measured in cents or dollars, only in the courage to demand the respect she deserved. The sun set behind them as their wagon rolled toward home,
painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of new beginnings.